Hi, today I'm going to show you how to work the V-stitch right-handed. The V-stitch is a lovely stitch. This one is it just here, this blue stitch here. It's not actually, technically speaking, a stitch in its own right. It's actually a stitch combination. And when you put the stitches together, they form a V shape, so that you can see that here. And that's why it's called a V, is because it gives you this V shape. A V stitch is actually made up of 3 stitches: a double crochet stitch, followed by a chain, followed by a second double crochet stitch, worked back into the same hole as the first stitch. Now that's a US double crochet stitch. It's a treble crochet stitch if you're using UK terms. I'm going to show you how to work a V stitch into a row of existing double crochet stitches. So I'm going to start off just by doing a chain of 19. So to make the chain, you just yarn over and pull through the loop that's on your hook. So that's 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18 and 19. Remember, the loop that's on your hook never counts as a stitch. It only counts as a stitch when it's come off the hook. To make it clearer for you to see what I'm doing, I'm going to put a stitch marker in this 19th chain that I made just here. So, not in the loop, but we're looking for the first V immediately underneath, which is here. And I'm just going to pop a stitch marker in there. For this particular pattern, when I do the V-stitch, I'm going to have one straight stitch by itself at either end of the row, and then we're going to have 5 V's in the middle of the row. Now I'm going to work a row of double crochet stitches, that's US double crochet stitches, UK trebles, into this chain. And to do that, I'm going to skip the first 3 chains. So the marked one is number 1, and then you're looking for the bumps along this top edge. So that's 2, that's 3, and we're going to work a double crochet stitch into number 4, which is just here. Now to work the double crochet stitch, yarn round, insert your hook into that chain, yarn over and come back through just this first loop. That gives you 3 loops on your hook. We yarn over and pull through the first 2 loops. Then you have 2 loops remaining on the hook, yarn over and pull through both of those. The chain that I've just worked into is this one here that's gone larger, and I'm looking for the next chain along. So find the larger hole and then find the next bump across the top, which is just here, and this is my next chain. So again, yarn over into the chain, yarn over, come back through. There's your 3 loops on the hook, yarn over through 2, yarn over through 2. And I'm going to work 1 double crochet stitch into each chain all the way down to the end of the row. And I will come back to you as soon as I've finished. So here we are. This gives us a row of 17 stitches. And if you need to count your double crochet stitches, take the hook out and make the loop bigger so that you don't lose that first stitch. And then what you can do is you can count the vertical posts of the stitch. It's really nice and easy with these stitches because they're quite tall. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, and the one on the end here is 17. Now this on the end here, these are the 3 chains that we skipped right at the beginning of the row. And as you can see, instead of being horizontal across the bottom, they've pulled up vertically and they become the first stitch in the row. So that's why we started off with a foundation chain of 19, but we have 17 stitches in our row, because these 3 chains have become 1 stitch. Now we're going to start the V-stitch row. So we're going to turn over and we're going to have 1 standalone stitch at the beginning of the row, and that is going to be a chain of 3. So 1, 2, 3 chains. And again, I'm going to mark this top chain so that it's really nice and easy to find when we need it for the end of the next row. It's just in here. The loop on the hook doesn't count, so we're going into this one just underneath, just there. Those 3 chains become stitch number 1. Now to make the V-stitch, we're going to skip the very first hole in the row because that's been covered by our starting chain. And we're going to skip the second hole as well. We're going to make a double crochet stitch into hole number 3 just here. So yarn over, insert your hook into the stitch, yarn over, come back through, yarn over through 2, yarn over through 2. We have 1 double crochet stitch. Now we're going to make 1 chain, and we make a second double crochet stitch back into this same hole that we just worked into. So yarn over and in, yarn over, back through, yarn over through 2, yarn over through 2. And if we have a look, that makes the V shape. By working them both into the same stitch, you pinch them together at the bottom, and by putting a chain in between them up here, you push them apart at the top, and there's your V. Now we're going to skip 2 stitches, 1, 2, and we're going to make our next V into the third one along. So we do a double crochet stitch, then a chain, then another double crochet stitch back into that same hole. And there's our second V. Now we skip 2 more stitches, 1, 2, and we're going into number 3 here. This row is going to give us 5 V's and 1 standalone stitch at either end of the row. Each V is made up of 3 stitches, the double crochet, the chain and the second double crochet. And so when you're counting V's, you do them in multiples of 3. The 17 stitches that we have here, you take away 1 for the beginning end and 1 for the far end, and that takes us down to 15 stitches, and 15 divided by 3 is 5. So 1, 2 and into here. So if you wanted to make more V's, you would just add stitches in multiples of 3. So you'd add additional chains to your foundation chain in multiples of 3. And we've got to do 1 more, so 1, 2, and then 1 last V in there. And then we're coming down to the end of the row, and we've got 2 stitches remaining. So we're going to skip the penultimate stitch just here, and we're going to work 1 double crochet stitch in where the chain is, where the stitch marker is into the chain at the end. Like so. That's our first row complete. Now, a V-stitch pattern is made up of 2 parts. You have the first row of V's here, which is your setup row, and then for row 2 of the V-stitch, we're going to do something slightly different. But the good thing is that row 3, row 4, row 5, they're all the same as row 2. So you only really have 2 rows to master, the setup row and then the second row. We're going to turn it over and start off with a chain of 3 again. 1, 2, 3. And that's our single stitch at the beginning of the row here. And now for row 2, when we work our V's, we're actually going to work them into the chain spaces in the middle of the V's from the row that we've already made. So the chain space is the space right in the middle of the V that exists because you put the chain in up here. We're not going to work into the top of the chain up here, we're actually working into the big hole right in the middle of the V. Sometimes when you're working your row, that can be a little bit tricky to see where it is. So as a good gauge, we're going to skip the first large hole in the row, which is this one just here, and we work a V into the second of these large holes. So you yarn over, insert your hook right into the middle of that hole, yarn over, come back through, yarn over through 2, yarn over through 2, and then make a chain and make our second double crochet stitch back into that same chain space that we went into before. And there you see, you have a V that sits inside a V. So there's a V in a V. And we're going to skip the next really big hole in the row. And we're looking for the next V, which is just here between my thumbs. We're going into the chain space in the middle. Now, we don't have to make a chain in between two V's. We only make the chain in the middle of the V itself. So we do double crochet into that chain space, then chain one, then another double crochet back into that same hole. Like that. No chain in between these V's. We're going into the next one, skip a large hole. Here's the next V, we're going into here. Double crochet, chain, double crochet, skip the next large hole along, and we're going into this next V. Chain, and another double crochet. Skip this hole, and we're going into here. And then we're going to skip the final big hole in the row, and we're going to make one last double crochet stitch where the stitch marker is on the end here. So we're going in. Remember, pick up 2 lengths of yarn when you go in. See, I've got 2 sat on the hook just there. Gives you a nice tidy finish. And we just do a double crochet stitch in there. And there we have it. Thank you for watching.